In a distant kingdom, there lived a young orphan named Fate Graphite. People in the kingdom looked down on him because they thought his skill was useless. Everyone in the kingdom had special abilities, but Fate's skill, called Gluttony, seemed useless because it only made his stomach growl loudly. One day, goblins attacked a carriage on its way to the Fort Kingdom. Luckily, a group of warriors was there and they defeated the goblins easily. When they returned to the capital, Fate overheard them talking about hunting goblins. He knew he couldn't do that kind of work because of his skill. The Varric siblings, along with members of the Holy Knights named Raphael, Hu, and Mel, approached Fate. They ordered him to guard the palace in exchange for some coins. When Fate took the coins, Hato stepped on his hand and kicked his stomach. Another Holy Knight named Roxy saw what happened and intervened. Roxy helped Fate and told him to report to her if the Varric siblings bothered him again. Fate was worried about Roxy getting hurt, so he didn't want her to get involved. After eating at his favorite bar, the noise in his stomach didn't stop, and he started feeling jealous of others. He wished he had a useful skill like everyone else. Later, he saw some thieves enter the palace and immediately told Roxy. She asked him to keep watch while she searched for the thieves. A few minutes later, he spotted a thief trying to escape. Remembering Roxy's trust in him, he attacked and killed the thief. This activated his gluttony skill, boosting his stats and giving him additional identify and telepathy skills. When Roxy came, she held his hand, showing her concern. He was surprised to hear her thoughts because of his telepathy skill. To thank him for his help, Roxy offered him a job working for her family, the Hart family. Although he was worried about the Varric siblings, he accepted Roxy's offer to get away from them. When he got home, he couldn't believe the changes in his stats. He hoped he could now defeat monsters. The next morning, he went to the market with only 2 silver coins. The shop owner offered him old and defective swords. Using Identify, he checked the stats of each sword. He liked a black sword, but he still felt useless in others' eyes. He was surprised when the sword spoke to him, and when he used Identify, he found out its name was Greed. The sword knew about his gluttony skill and said they had a lot in common. He bought the sword and went to the goblin's lair to try it out. For every goblin he killed, his skills increased. After fighting many goblins for hours, he defeated them all and couldn't believe the increase in his stats and new skills. His stomach no longer rumbled, and Greed explained that the gluttony skill could steal other skills from those he killed. This was why he gained their skills. It was hard for others to know this because it was against the divine law. He traded the goblin's ears for money. Soon, he saw a man carrying a child. When the child touched him, he realized she needed help. He followed them to a warehouse where he overheard that the child, Sahara, was going to be delivered to a holy knight for amusement. Sahara was from the church's orphanage, and the nuns were looking for her while the kidnapper was away. Fate quickly approached Sahara, but when he let her go, the kidnapper returned and was behind him. Greed knew the enemy thought he was stronger than Fate, so he told Fate his plan. They ran away first, and when they saw a chance, Fate attacked the kidnapper. The kidnapper dodged the first attack, but Fate destroyed his weapon with the next one. Fate asked who the holy knight the kidnapper mentioned was, and found out it was Ho. After leaving the warehouse, they ate because they were both hungry. Then Fate took Sahara to the church. Meanwhile, at the bar where Fate usually had dinner, the barkeeper and an old man talked about the death of Mason, who was also a holy knight and Roxy's father. Mason died fighting the divine dragon in Gallia. They were worried because Mason was the only one who could maintain order among the holy knights, especially regarding the Valeric. The next morning, Fate went to the Holy Knight district for his first day working for the Hart family. He was amazed at the size of Roxy's family mansion. After a while, Roxy met him, and they went to her father's grave. Fate learned about Roxy's father's death, which upset him. A week passed, and while Fate was talking to Mr. Oliver and Mr. Minerva, Roxy had the housemaid Haru call him. Roxy wanted to check if he was doing well at work. While talking to her, Fate felt hungry faster than before and suddenly felt dizzy, losing consciousness. When he woke up in his room, he found Roxy's letter on his desk, telling him to rest until the next day. He asked Greed about the strange things happening in his body, and Greed explained that it was because Fate had already tasted the souls of those he defeated, and his body automatically desired more. It was his fate to consume souls until his last breath. If he couldn't control it, he'd attack anyone he came across. The sign he was reaching his limit was a change in the color of his eye. To satisfy his gluttony, they hunted and killed more goblins, but even after killing many, it wasn't enough. So they went to the hobgoblin forest to attack more goblins. When his eye color returned to normal, he saw the Goblin King. Checking its stats, he found it had a health regeneration skill. While it was busy eating, Fate attacked one of its arms. The Goblin King tried to retaliate, but Fate killed it easily. Along with gaining its skills, Fate's stats increased, allowing Greed to access its first level. In return, everything Fate had saved since they met would be taken. Fate agreed to this, and Greed transformed into a magic bow. Fate immediately tried out Greed's new form by shooting a nearby goblin. They took the Goblin King's ear and donated it to the church. One day, Fate caught Roxy trying to leave the gate. She explained she was doing a secret inspection, which was why she disguised herself. Fate was ready to go back to work, but Roxy decided to take him along for the inspection. She used the name Lexi to avoid being recognized. As they passed the grape market, Roxy accidentally revealed her identity when she mentioned their family's vineyard. Fortunately, Greed helped make the salesman less suspicious. Later, a holy knight arrived, and Fate's stomach growled loudly, making the knight angry. When Fate apologized, the knight wasn't satisfied because Fate's voice was weak. Just as the knight was about to kick Fate, Roxy stepped in. The knight noticed Roxy's familiarity and people started to notice her resemblance to Roxy. To avoid attention, Roxy pretended to be Fate's girlfriend. As they passed a jewelry store, Roxy stopped to admire the gems. Fate noticed she liked one but didn't take it. Instead, she asked Fate to take her to some warriors she knew. They overheard men talking about someone who donated a goblin ear to the church. This was what Roxy wanted to investigate, and Fate realized she was investigating him because some people thought he was a monster. He took Roxy to the bar where he usually ate. They were surprised to see Ed there because they thought Fate was dead. They learned from an ad that there was a wandering monster called a lich, and the Holy Knights were trying to deal with it. Fate worried that Roxy might join the quest to arrest him. After they finished eating, they went to a famous blacksmith to maintain Greed. While they walked, they saw the Valeric siblings bullying a child. Roxy told Fate to take the child away, and who couldn't stop him when he recognized her. Roxy asked Raphael why she wasn't told about the Holy Knight's plan regarding the lich. Raphael said they didn't inform her because she might still be mourning her father's death. They found out the boy had been separated from his mother, so they helped him find her. That night, Fate thought of a way to avoid being recognized by Roxy while killing monsters. Greed suggested using a mask, and they found one with the ability to change anyone's appearance. They passed by the gem shop again, and Fate bought an ore and gave it to Roxy. Inside, there was a gem similar to the one she liked. One day, Roxy took Fate to the Hart family's territory to experience picking fresh grapes, something the Hart family was proud of. When they reached home, Roxy's mother, named Aisha, greeted them. Inside, Roxy remembered the day she became a holy knight and promised her father she would do the same things he did. After a few minutes, they started picking grapes from the vineyard. Fate talked to one of the grape harvesters and learned that Roxy wasn't just helping with the harvest, she was also dealing with the kobolds who were ruining the crops. In the afternoon, Fate saw a woman carrying a large weapon and suspected she wasn't from SE Fort. When they met, she spoke to him, surprising him with her eyes, which were the same as his. He couldn't use Identify on her, and she mentioned she was looking for the kobolds but would leave them to Fate. He asked Greed who this girl was, but the sword didn't give a direct answer. Roxy approached and said the girl was possibly a Galleon. Everyone knew most Galleons were killed by monsters, but rumors said a few survived. The next morning, the harvesters found the grape plants damaged. They began hunting down the kobolds and were surprised to encounter a big one. This activated Fate's half-starvation mode. When he looked at the big kobold stats, it was level 50, and Greed mentioned it was a crowned beast. They returned to the village to tell the residents to evacuate, and Roxy promised to take care of the problem. But Greed knew that Roxy couldn't fight a crowned beast alone. Although Fate wasn't sure if he could defeat the monster, he still decided to fight too. So, at night, he and Greed started dealing with them. Using the magic bow, Fate reduced the number of enemies. Then, he used the sword to kill the others, but he knew it wasn't enough. When he rushed to the Kobold's leader, he had an attack ready that was so strong it threw Fate away. A Kobold took the opportunity to attack him, but Fate pretended to be hurt and then attacked the enemy. After killing the monster, he used Greed's first stage ultimate, called the Bloody Ptarmigan, and with its great strength, the leader of the Kobolds was dissolved immediately. The next day, Roxy and the people couldn't believe it when they saw the dead Kobolds and the great damage caused by the Bloody Ptarmigan. But according to Roxy's suspicion, it might have been done by the Gallon woman they saw because she heard they were stronger than the Holy Knights. On that day, they would return to the Holy Knight district, but before they left, Aisha talked to Fate. She begged Fate to support and take care of Roxy because she knew she wouldn't last long for her daughter. When they got back, Fate tried to fight his half-starvation mode, but killing the goblins wasn't enough to satisfy it. So, he just covered one of his eyes, which was still red, so that no one else could see it. He heard from Ad that who would lead the search to arrest him. He also learned that the expedition would start again in Gallia, and Raphael's group was pleased because Roxy would lead it. Meanwhile, Raphael and Melon planned to go to Ten Bur for Raphael's research on immortality, and they reminded who to denounce the Lich. Fate even tried to stop Roxy, but she had already made up her mind. He was angry at the things that the Varric siblings were doing to Roxy, so he would make sure they would get a taste of his punishment. That night, he was seen by Hado, who was with other warriors. Hado had the rest of his companions attack him, but he easily defeated them. After witnessing the fight, Ho's other companions were so scared that they ran away. When they were alone, Fate took off his mask, and Hado could not believe how he got so strong. Before Fate attacked, he asked Greed if he could defeat a holy sword. Greed calmly said that Hunk's holy sword would not work on him. When Hado attacked with his Grand Cross, Fate easily dodged it and immediately aimed to destroy Hu's holy sword. Hu's fear caused him to fall, and he knew he could not defeat his opponent. Fate pulled him up and then slammed Hu's face into a tree. Hu tried to beg for his life, but Fate just threw him away and used the Bloody Ptarmigan on him. Because of this, Hu's hands and feet were dismembered. Before Fate decided to kill him, he asked about Roxy's expedition to Gallia. He found out that Roxy had volunteered to do it, and Hu said that he could cancel it as long as Fate kept him alive. But Fate had no intention of letting him live because he also wanted to take revenge for the things they did to him before. After this, he acquired the Holy Sword technique skill, and Greed also reached his second level, which was a great scythe. When Roxy left, she left a recommendation letter for Fate to become an employee of a lord's manor. She did this so that the Varric siblings would no longer bother him, but Fate did not accept it because he intended to become a warrior. He decided to follow Roxy because he wanted to protect her. Meanwhile, a warrior close to Roxy named Miria volunteered to join the expedition. Aside from her, Mugan was also there because he wanted to avenge Roxy's father. Mug's daughter, named Rain, was studying the corpses of goblins that Fate had killed. Her colleague noticed that the injuries sustained by these monsters did not come from normal arrows. Rain checked this in a book and was sure that it was from magic arrows. They also learned that it was from the Black Sword, which was one of the weapons of mortal sin. Rain did not know any other information about them yet, but she wanted to see weapons of mortal sin. The first town that Fate passed through was the town of Tetra, which was the town where he came from. He tried to ask if there was a carriage that would travel that day, but he was told to come back the next day. Since his stomach was noisy again, he looked for something to eat. Suddenly, when he went to a bar, he saw his childhood friend named Issei, who was begging the warriors to help their village from the monsters. When Issei was being oppressed by the warriors, Fate intervened, and with his strength, the warriors did not try to fight him. Issei was shocked when he found out that it was Fate who helped him. Fate also remembered what Set used to do to him when they were young. Those were also the times when he and his father were still together. But when his father died, the village chief, who was Set's father, kicked him out of the village. Set begged him to help their village since he also needed to get rid of monsters. Fate agreed to this. When they arrived at the village, Set's father still did not accept fate. If the monsters attacked that night, he wanted to use him as a sacrifice. When Set took him to his house, Fate found out that Set's wife was gone. Then, Set started telling him the details about the monsters. After a few moments, Fate's stomach rumbled, so Set prepared something for him to eat. Set's daughter approached him and gave him some candy. While they were eating, Fate suddenly became dizzy and lost consciousness. When Set's daughter mentioned the candy that her grandfather had given to her, Set realized that his father was really serious about making Fate a sacrifice for the monsters. But after a while, the monsters also arrived. So, Set immediately made a medicine for Fate to drink. When Fate felt better, he went out to face the monsters. The fire quickly consumed the other houses, and the monsters ate the people that they caught. Fate used the great scythe, so he quickly killed all the monsters and got the fireball skill. But there was another remaining enemy, which was the leader of the monsters who had the fire resistance skill. The monster rushed at him, so Fate faced it fearlessly and successfully defeated it using the great scythe. Then he also acquired the fire resistance skill. Unfortunately, only Set and his daughter were left alive in the village. Fate knew that the land was not good in the area, so Set thought that he would look for a job in the town. Before Fate left the village, he visited his father's grave first. Then he made an agreement with the owner of the carriage that he would serve as his escort in exchange for 3 gold coins. But they were suddenly ambushed by a group of bandits on the road. When Fate got off, the owner of the carriage begged him not to leave him. The bandits were about to rush towards them when suddenly someone attacked them. It turned out to be the Galleon woman that Fate saw when he was in the vineyard of Roxy's family. She also boarded the carriage, and that was when they talked to each other. This girl introduced herself with the name Mine, who also had the skill of deadly sin. She also knew Fate's gluttony skill and even about greed. When they arrived in Lancaster territory, they even caught up with the sideshow of the Lord of Lancaster named Rudolph. According to the owner of the carriage, he might be preparing for the arrival of Roxy. So Fate found out that he came earlier than Roxy's army. After they got the payment as an escort, Mine suddenly fell asleep. So, he picked her up, and while they were looking for an inn, he noticed different marks on the necks of the people. When they found a place to stay, it was here that Greed mentioned to Fate that Mine's weapon was called Sloth, which was also one of the weapons of mortal sin. Then Greed also informed him about the skills of deadly sin and the weapons of mortal sins. Among the 7, Gluttony was said to be the most sinful, so he reminded Fate that he needed to be strong because gluttony might overpower him at any time. At night, they went out to fight the Sandmen. They tried to enhance the magic arrow with a fireball, and they immediately defeated them. But it turned out that there were still more enemies. When they defeated all of them, Fate sensed a crowned beast in the distance. They went to it, and it was currently being fought by other warriors. When the monster attacked Fate, he countered it with a great scythe. Fate noticed that the core was trying to escape, so he quickly changed his weapon to the magic bow and used the bloody ptarmigan. Because of this, they completely defeated it, and Fate acquired the sandstorm skill. When he got back to the inn, he took Mine with him to exchange the sand golem that he defeated for gold coins. Rudolph suddenly came to him because he found out what Fate did. He wanted to take Fate and make him his servant, but Mine immediately objected to this because she had seen Fate first. After what she said, Rudolph did not take it seriously, so Mine just hit him with her weapon. Fate knew that she had caused a big problem, so they quickly boarded the carriage to leave the place. While they were on the trip, Fate annoyed Mine for being greedy, so she activated the sloth, causing it to get heavy and damage the carriage's wheels. While they were waiting for the carriage to be fixed, he and Mine entered a village that was not far from them. Fate noticed that this village seemed to be peaceful, so Greed thought that there might be a strong person guarding it. After a while, they spotted an old man cleaning his sword. Fate asked him who the village chief was because they were looking for a temporary place to stay. It turned out that the old man was the village chief, and they also learned that he was a holy knight because of the holy sword he held. The old man said they could stay if Fate competed with him in a sword fight. Although Fate used Identify on him, the old man also had the Identify skill. They agreed to a duel, but Fate was quickly defeated. He thought they couldn't stay there because he lost the duel, but the old man decided they could still stay under one condition: Fate had to train under him. Since Fate saw nothing wrong with it, he agreed. Then, he introduced himself, and the old man introduced himself as Aaron Barbados. When Mine arrived, Fate told her they already had a place to stay. Mine immediately took the opportunity to rest while Fate and Aaron started training. Aaron first taught him how to fight without using any weapons. After a while, one of Fate's eyes turned red again, which Aaron noticed. It turned out that Fate's half-starvation mode was activated, allowing him to keep up with Aaron's moves. At night, while Aaron was out getting their food, Fate saw a family painting of Aaron on the wall. That's when he realized why Aaron wanted to train him, because he resembled his son. The next day, they practiced with the sword, but Fate only used a wooden stick. Aaron wanted Fate to block the attack with the wood, and when Aaron attacked, Fate successfully did it. Aaron was amazed by him. At night, while they were eating, Fate asked Aaron about the castle in the distance. Aaron said that the castle used to be his, but 15 years ago, while he was on a mission as a holy knight, the Lich Lord attacked their castle. Aaron knew Fate planned to go there, so he decided to come along, while Mine would watch over the village first. When they got to the castle, they fought the disciples of the Lich Lord outside. They went inside without difficulty, but when they got to the second floor, they were surprised to see people there. Aaron's wife, Diana, and his son, Luke, were also there to greet him. Aaron was very happy with this, but Greed knew that it was just an illusion. When Aaron was about to give the souvenir he promised to Luke, Luke suddenly attacked him. Fortunately, Aaron already knew this and was able to block it. He told Fate that he would take care of it. So, Fate went ahead to find the Lich Lord. Fate quickly tracked down the Lich Lord, who immediately attacked him. After Fate destroyed its weapon, he was surrounded by corpses begging him to save them. Suddenly, Aaron came there and used the Grand Cross, but he was still struggling to defeat the Lich Lord. So, Fate took Luke's sword, and the two of them combined their Grand Cross. After that, they finally defeated the Lich Lord and saved the corpses it controlled. The souls of Diana and Luke appeared to Aaron to make him feel at ease. Then, he also gave the souvenir he promised to Luke. The Lich Lord suddenly tried to attack Aaron, but Fate quickly stopped it. When they returned to the village, Aaron gave Mine a bag of coins for her effort in guarding the village. Then, Aaron remembered that he had seen Mine 50 years ago when some monsters attacked their area, and her appearance was still the same as before, unchanged. Mine also mentioned that she was a phantom that could not die. Before Fate left, Aaron told him that if he finished what he had to do, he must come back because he had something important to say to him. Meanwhile, in Sephir, Raphael and Melon had returned with a philosopher's stone that had the ability to treat any kind of pain and injury. When their butler entered the room, they found out that who was dead. They learned that the one who killed who was not a lich but a warrior. Just a few hours after Fate and Mine left, Roxy's group arrived at Howen. They did not know that Fate and Aaron had already defeated the Lich Lord. So when they approached the castle, they were surprised that they did not feel any monsters there. Aaron appeared to them after a few moments, and Mugan and Nelton recognized him because Aaron was not only the head of the Barbados family but also an expert swordsman known as the Blade of Light. Roxy was surprised that Aaron knew her, so Aaron said that Mason and Aisha were his best friends, and he was the one who gave Roxy her name. Then, they also found out that Aaron had defeated the Lich Lord with the help of a young man. When Roxy asked the name of the man that Aaron was referring to, he didn't say it because Fate told him to keep it a secret for now. Aaron knew that Roxy was going to Gallia, so he thought that the Valaks were behind it. Roxy said she volunteered to go, but Aaron knew she was manipulated. When Roxy mentioned inheriting her father's ideal, Aaron realized Mason was already dead. Because of this, he decided to teach Roxy how to fight in Gallia. Meanwhile, Mine took Fate to where she was born. It wasn't long before they saw a big cocoon that Greed said was a chimera. As they approached it, Fate saw it was a chimera, but he couldn't see its skill. Mine wanted to work with Fate to defeat it because of his gluttony power. Mine attacked the cocoon to release the chimera, revealing a woman with red eyes as its core. Mine wanted Fate to kill her. When the chimera attacked, they ran away, but Mine decided to fight back. However, the chimera regenerated each time, becoming stronger with each attack. Greed explained that this was the sloth's ability, making it heavier with each hit. Fate used his half-starvation mode to keep up in the battle and support Mine. Suddenly, the Chimera created a barrier. When Fate tried to use the Great Scythe on the Chimera, it didn't work. So, he searched for its weak spot and targeted it right away. The Chimera tried to escape, so Mine had Fate ride a sloth to throw him towards it. Before he could get close, Fate activated the secret technique of the Great Scythe and aimed at the Chimera's core with the deadly Inferno. Suddenly, everything changed, and he thought he had used telepathy. He saw Mine hugging the woman who looked like the Chimera's core. Because of Mine's sacrifice, Fate also asked her to end his life if he ever lost control. Fate decided to go to Babylon, but Mine chose to stay because she still had things to do there. After a while, Greed reached his level 3 form, which was a magic shield. When Fate arrived in Babylon, Roxy was there too, so he quickly put on his mask. Suddenly, he felt something strange behind him, so he turned around. The next day, he saw different types of warriors gathered in Babylon. Some were former members of the Holy Knights, while others hated them. Even sinners, as long as they were strong, were accepted there because they could help fight against monsters. Fate thought it was a perfect place for him. Roxy was greeted by another Holy Knight named Northern Alistair, who was temporarily assigned to Babylon's order after her father's death. As Fate passed by a store, Greed liked the scabbard on display, so they went inside. When the owner checked out Greed, Fate learned that a scabbard for Greed would cost 500 gold coins. Since he didn't have that much money, he left. He and his sword decided to earn money by killing monsters from Gallia to cover their expenses. When they reached the area, Fate immediately noticed a strong smell. Soon, he saw many orcs coming towards him. He was ready to fight them when other warriors suddenly appeared and attacked the orcs first. Although they beat him to it, more orcs approached, so Fate fought them off using his magic shield. After returning to Babylon to claim their reward, the other warriors were surprised to see Fate carrying many orc ears in his bags. They claimed they were the ones who defeated all the orcs earlier. This annoyed Fate, and a fight broke out. He managed to knock down the bald guy and his companions. When Fate received his gold coins, Roxy arrived. Initially, they thought Fate started the trouble, but Roxy realized he was defending himself. Instead of punishing him, she reminded him to avoid trouble if possible. As they were leaving, Roxy noticed Fate's torn outfit, which embarrassed him, so he left in shame. While struggling with his appearance, the owner of the shop where he inquired about the scabbard approached him. He introduced himself as Jade Stratos and learned about Fate's earlier altercation with the other warriors. He was searching for someone to wear the clothes he made to promote his store's items. He asked Fate to wear them, and since Fate needed new clothes, he agreed to Jade's offer. After Fate put on the clothes, Jade still asked for money unexpectedly. When Fate went outside, he saw some men who seemed excited. They were excited because of a woman. When she looked at Fate, he couldn't stop looking at her. She came up to him, and he was surprised she could recognize him even though he wore a mask. The woman said they were alike, revealing she also had the skill of the deadly sin. She introduced herself as Eyes of Lust and took him to a bar. Fate learned she had been watching him since he was in the capital and she also knew about Greed. He asked if she knew Mine, but I said they didn't talk much because she was a second generation. They also discussed the chimera they defeated with Mine, but Eris mentioned that there were still a few chimeras left, which could become a big problem once they grow up. Eris didn't prolong their talk and explained her purpose. She said she was a guardian of the kingdom, meaning she would prioritize the kingdom's well-being over everything else. If there was something good for the kingdom's future, she would support it. One such thing was Roxy's death in Gallia, which made Fate angry. Eris explained the potential benefits of Roxy's death, but Fate didn't care. He told her that no matter who planned it or who he had to fight against, he would protect Roxy at all costs. The next day, Northern informed Roxy that they lost contact with the army sent to Gallia for raw materials. Roxy decided to prepare her army for a rescue operation in the Great Ravine. Meanwhile, Fate asked Jade to make a scabbard for Greed, but Jade said he needed a magic crystal, which could only be found near the Great Ravine in Gallia. When Roxy's group went to Gallia, they had trouble finding the Great Ravine because their compass didn't work. They decided to wait for the orcs, knowing they would lead them to the Great Ravine. That night, Fate dreamt about the woman who served as the core of the chimera they fought with mine. She seemed to be saying something, but he couldn't hear her over the noise. A little while later, he suddenly found himself back where he had seen the monsters he had defeated, including Hu and the kidnapper. They seemed to be pulling him into a pool of blood, and that's when he woke up. At that moment, salamanders were attacking, so Fate used his magic bow to target them. He noticed something strange about how the salamanders were behaving, so he and Greed thought someone might be controlling them. Roxy's group wasn't far, and they were also under attack by salamanders. They were surrounded by fire, and when Miria tried to fight back, it didn't work. Fate arrived to help, using his sharp edge to defeat the salamanders. He asked if they knew anything about the emblem on the salamanders' heads. Mugan was surprised they all had the same emblem, knowing that crowned beasts rarely cooperate. Miria also noticed the monsters were only targeting Roxy, so Fate decided to go with Roxy's group since he was also heading to the Great Ravine. When they arrived, Roxy's group split up to search for the missing army. After some hours of searching, Fate found Eris, who seemed to be observing something before leaving. When he looked back, he was surprised to see the chimera, but it had no core. He and Greed thought there might have been other chimeras placed there before. When Fate remembered Eris, there was a sudden explosion in the distance. He hurried there because he knew Roxy's group was searching there. They were fighting the chimeras. When Fate arrived, he told Roxy about the chimeras and their core that they should target. Since her companions were injured, Fate and Roxy teamed up to deal with the enemies. Fate focused on fighting the chimera, while Roxy was instructed to attack its core. Only one chimera remained, but it jumped, causing the ground to collapse, and Fate and Roxy fell. When they woke up, Fate shared more information about the chimera with Roxy. He asked about their rescue operation, but Roxy sadly said they were too late. Their conversation returned to the chimera, and when Fate mentioned who told him about it, Roxy realized he meant Mine. He didn't expect her to know about his past with Mine, and he couldn't deny it anymore. Suddenly, one of his eyes turned red, so he quickly moved away from Roxy. He also smelled a nearby monster, which turned out to be the chimera, but he defeated it quickly. He noticed the emblem on the core, the same as the one he saw on the salamanders. This confirmed someone was trying to kill Roxy. As Roxy approached him, something fell near them. It was the magic crystal Fate was looking for. After obtaining the magic crystal, they emerged from the ordeal a few days later. Roxy then summoned Fate to discuss the violence he was involved in. Since they returned from the Great Ravine, Fate thought he wasn't the one who started the trouble. However, Roxy said she couldn't overlook any misunderstanding anymore. To keep Fate out of trouble, Roxy suggested he join the royal army. Fate immediately refused. Because of his refusal, he was told he had to pay for his mistakes by going to jail. Fate was forced to fight, but he didn't remove Greed's scabbard. At the start of their fight, Fate only blocked Roxy's attacks. Then Roxy aimed for his mask, so Fate used the holy sword technique, surprising her because his weapon wasn't a holy sword. She thought he might have been a holy knight before, but Fate denied it. When he attacked, he pushed Roxy back. However, he lost focus when he saw the necklace she was wearing, leading to his defeat in their fight. As Fate was about to leave, Roxy asked if he also trained with Aaron because of his fighting style. Aaron had mentioned a traveler with extreme powers, but Fate just told Roxy to focus on protecting herself in Gallia. When Fate left, Mugan talked to him about the salamander and chimera, suspecting someone was controlling them. Mugan mentioned their family had been studying Galan technology for a long time, starting with his father and now with his daughter. On the other hand, Rain heard some information about what Raphael was doing. He locked himself in a room, studying the Philosopher's Stone he got in Tend Burn. Rain looked at her book, which contained information about it. Apart from healing pain and wounds, it could also give power to the person holding it. While Fate was resting, he remembered what Mine had told him about the domain of E. This was the level of power he must reach to defeat the divine dragon. Suddenly, he heard the sound of the siren signaling that monsters were approaching Babylon, known as the Death March. Fate saw Roxy's group charging forward to face the monsters. He used the half-starvation mode and saw something following Roxy's army. He used the magic bow to stop it before it could reach Roxy. It was forced to show itself, revealing a big slime monster with an emblem. When he tried to approach it, it showered him with acid. Luckily, greed immediately turned itself into a shield. Fate then attacked the slime. It suddenly went underground to chase Roxy again. Fate followed and attacked it, noticing someone else had hit it first. He successfully got its soul but was surprised because it was still alive. Then he saw a person above wearing a perception-altering mask like his. He thought it was eyes, so he went up, and greed recognized its weapon as the black gun sword Envy, one of the weapons of mortal sin. He got blocked by slimes, and when they swallowed him, he killed them right away. He tried to attack the enemy, but it didn't work because the person created a barrier. So, he used his sword and realized it wasn't eyes. When he backed off, the opponent shot bullets at him, and even though he had a magic shield, he still got hit. Just when the enemy was about to finish him off, he suddenly got stronger and faster, hitting the opponent's mask. He found out it was Northern, who called the Divine Dragon to attack Roxy. Fate managed to block the dragon's attack on Roxy, and when it attacked again, Fate's mask got destroyed, making Roxy recognize him. He apologized for lying and left to face the Divine Dragon again. When he saw Northern, he used the Grand Cross to return it to the Divine Dragon. This led to another fight between him and Northern. Northern thought he was stronger because Fate used a secret art on the dragon. He managed to injure Fate's left hand, but then someone attacked him from behind. It turned out that Fate had sacrificed one of his hands to trick him. After Fate defeated Northern, he suddenly found himself in a white dimension. He saw Haniel's core again, but this time she introduced herself as Luna. Luna thanked him for ending her life but also apologized because she couldn't help him anymore. Fate realized that Luna was the reason why his gluttony skill was silent for a while. However, Luna said she couldn't support him anymore and warned him that he would lose control if he swallowed the Divine Dragon. When Fate fell, Greed quickly grabbed him before they returned to reality. Fate thanked Luna for the warning but said he wouldn't let the Divine Dragon be free without a master. Back in reality, Fate released the Divine Dragon from the secret art and fought it, cutting off its wings until it fell. Despite the dragon's attempts to fight back, Fate managed to end its life. However, using too much power, Fate's body began to succumb to the gluttony skill. Knowing he wouldn't be able to control it, he transferred all his stats to Greed. This was to minimize the damage he might cause if he lost control. Shortly after, Mine arrived to fulfill her promise to Fate, but Roxy suddenly appeared and intervened, begging Fate to stop his plan. This surprised Fate, causing him to rethink his actions regarding the gluttony skill. Suddenly, Fate fell silent, realizing that deep down, he wanted Roxy to save him just as she had saved him before. However, he was overwhelmed by extreme fatigue and lost consciousness. When he woke up a week later, he found Eris and Am beside him. They explained that they had been searching for Greed in Gallia, but Mine had been preoccupied with Envy and forgot to bring Greed along. Although Mine was concerned that Envy might find a new vessel like Northern, she decided to discard the weapon of mortal sin since it was indestructible. Eris informed Fate that they needed his help, especially after he had proven himself by defeating the Divine Dragon. She revealed that the plan to harm Roxy had been orchestrated by Envy alone, and with the death of the Divine Dragon, the kingdom would enter a new era. Therefore, they needed to prepare for whatever might come next, which was the responsibility of those who wielded the deadly sin skills. Fate couldn't refuse Eris's request. She also mentioned their plan to return his hand, but they needed to leave before Roxy arrived, knowing her effect on the gluttony skill. A few minutes later, when Roxy arrived, she was surprised to find Fate gone. He left a letter apologizing to her but promised to return. Reading the letter, Roxy remembered the day she first met Fate. Meanwhile, Raphael received news that Fate was the one who killed Hu, and he seemed pleased by this revelation. When Fate and the girls reached Gallia, they began the ritual to fix Fate's hand using Greed's level 4 form, known as Twilight Healing. Fate's hand was successfully restored. This marks the conclusion of the last episode of Berserk of Gluttony Season 1. I hope you enjoyed it and give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel to stay updated on new videos. Thank you for watching.